Welcome to your Daily 5 for Wednesday, March 19th, 2025. I think I've mentioned at least a couple of times in the past over shows and fives that I'm a big fan of the first four Hellraiser films. I actually like each of them for different reasons. I think they do different things, but I think they're all actually especially 3 and 4 are much better movies than most people remember. And, 1 and 2 are, of course, classics in their own right. And Arrow Video released a very, very nice box set of the first 4 Hellraiser films, which is called the Quartet of Torment. If you have not seen this thing, it is one of the most beautiful box sets you could get. I mean, it is just a work of art. The actual physical construction, the way everything is laid out. It is a set that's worth every penny that you will spend on it. And it has all the 4K releases of the mainline first 4 Hellraiser films. And in particular, one item was of particular interest, and that was that there is a work print on the Hellraiser Bloodline disc that is a different work print than the one that has been traditionally floating around. This one was sourced from a VHS copy. It does have a time code on it, but it does have finished effects and finished music, unlike the previous work print that was basically widely available for Hellraiser Bloodline. And if you don't know, Bloodline had a very troubled production. It was just a mess top to bottom. It was intended to be a much different, much darker, much more straightforward film than ended up being what was released. There are people who prefer the theatrical cut, but having now watched the work print, and I have some clips I'm going to play on the Friday show because I want to demonstrate the differences, and I think they are important. Having watched the Arrow work print, whatever they're calling it, the one that has the finished effects and music, it is such a superior film in terms of the storytelling. And in particular, it makes Angelique, the female demon of the film, into a much better character. Because if you watch the theatrical cut of Bloodline, it's never really clear why she's there outside of what you would assume is, okay, they just wanted a pretty actress who could have a nude scene where she's sleeping with the main character. But outside of that, she was always a murky and kind of strangely placed character. Whereas in the work print, she is a much more driven, there is no sex scene in the work print. That should tell you that they prioritize the actual character over these superficial elements. And she actually has her own agenda, and she is, in many ways, in opposition to Pinhead. She's not there as his consort or ex or whatever they try to do in the theatrical cut, but instead she is actually trying to replace him, more or less, which places her in opposition to him as the film goes on. It is such a drastically different movie that my nearest comparison would be when I talked about the Cyborg cut, the alternate cut of Cyborg that Albert Pune originally wanted to make, where that's a much more religious film. It is all about religion and Satan and evil, whereas Cyborg, as it was released, was definitely not that, or at least was not overtly that. Well, the Bloodline work print is really Angelique's story as much as it is Merchant's story, the toy maker's story. And I think it's so much better with that, because she makes more sense and is a more interesting character. It's probably the only time I can think of, outside of Hellraiser 2, when Channard becomes whatever they call him after he transforms. He is obviously at that point Pinhead's equal, but that's only at the very end of the film, whereas Angelique is much more of a throughout the film equal and peer to Pinhead, and makes it a much more interesting film. So I'm going to play some clips from it because what they cut out drastically changes the movie in many ways. But I actually think that the work print for me is now my preferred version of it. The only shame about it is that it's only in VHS quality, and it's perfectly watchable, but it is not a pristine 4K work print, not like, say, Alien 3 or something where you had a nice higher quality version of that. But I would say if you were ever interested in the kind of lost version of what Hellraiser Bloodline was originally intended to be, it is available. You can find it on Archive. I will actually link to it so you can watch it. Somebody actually made a widescreen version where they cut off that time code. Also, it cuts off some parts where you can see the boom mic and mistakes like that, so it clearly wasn't intended to be watched in the full mat. But I would say it is absolutely worth watching. And for anybody who found that Bloodline was kind of an inferior sequel, this version of it is different enough that I think for some people, it could actually change their outlook on this movie entirely. So Hellraiser Bloodline, as it was released, may not be the best version of this story, but the work print drastically improves it. So it's worth watching. Later.